my fellow wizards, if you want a chance at any of the amazing drops from the 8 wooden skeleton key bosses and chests in Wizard101, you'll need a steady supply of wooden keys, which can often be difficult to get with a bunch of different methods to choose from. So today I'm here with the ultimate wooden skeleton key guide, where I'll cover every single way to get wooden skeleton keys while highlighting which methods I find are the quickest and easiest so you'll never be locked out again. First, let's cover the paid options because some people have crowns burning a hole in their pocket and zero impulse control. Historically, KI has offered skeleton key bundles in the crown shop for limited periods of time, though not with any real consistency, so it can be hard to predict when they might next add similar bundles to the crown shop. However, if you keep your eyes open, you may be able to purchase gold, stone, and wooden keys if you despise the idea of farming or crafting them. I obviously don't generally recommend wasting real money on stuff you can get for free through other means, but hey, you do you. In addition, the Scroll of Fortune sometimes has skeleton keys available in both the paid and unpaid sections, so it's always worth keeping an eye out each season to see if you can nab some bonus keys while taking part in various weekly events and earning those event points. Moving on to your crafting options, we have Maxwell Sharp, who's located in the shopping district of Wizard City and runs the Ratemystitch event. If you check his crafting recipes, you'll see that he has an option to craft wooden skeleton keys for 12 wooden buttons and 10 mistwood, and you can earn the reagents to craft them by simply participating in the Ratemystitch event. Starting at level 10, and while the monthly event is active, you can earn up to 15 points per day by simply rating people's stitches, which thankfully takes only a few minutes per day. And hey, who doesn't love secretly judging people and their, unique fashion choices? In addition, you can also earn a one-time bonus of 50 points per event for earning the Judge's Choice Award by submitting your own stitch for judgment and getting a high enough rating from a certain number of people. In my experience, getting Judge's Choice, you'll need roughly 15 or more people to give your stitch a rating of 6 stars or higher on average, but overall I find it fairly easy to consistently get as long as your stitch is staying within the theme of the event. So like, pro tip, if the theme is death, don't be rolling up to Maxwell with your basic Storm Insignia gear stitch and expect to earn a good rating. Anyway, at 15 event points you'll earn 12 wooden buttons, at 45 points you'll earn 12 tailor chalk, and at the max 105 points you'll earn 12 pin cushions. And conveniently, you can actually transmute the tailor chalk and pin cushions into more wooden buttons with more crafting recipes at Maxwell, so if you earn all the possible event points, you can actually get enough reagents to craft 3 wooden skeleton keys per event per wizard, which is pretty awesome considering this really only takes a few minutes per day to participate. As for mistwood, you can either try to nab some at the bazaar, or it can be fairly easily found and harvested around Wizard City and other worlds. For those seasoned anglers out there, you can also technically find wooden skeleton keys in fishing chests in both Mangrove Marsh and 3 Points in Azteca. I have a dedicated video on the best ways to get chests from fishing, so definitely check that out if you need extra help. But basically, you want to just keep fishing until you get that lucky chest with a wooden skeleton key inside. But obviously, this method is super RNG focused and not an easy or consistent way to get keys, especially since you'll also be burning energy unless you fish during the zero energy fishing membership benefit. So I really can't recommend this as a viable option, but it's there if you want to test your luck. Next, we have wooden skeleton keys you're actually guaranteed to get by completing certain quests, and both of these are actually fairly early side quests in Wizard City. First, we have the quest Unlocking the Truth, which is given by Diego the Duel Master after completing Triton Avenue's questline. He'll direct you to Clortho in the Wizard City Library, and upon talking to him, he'll give you a wooden skeleton key, just like that.
That was easy.
Now, technically, you're supposed to use that key to access the wooden skeleton key boss Roberto, located in Old Town, but there's no rule saying you have to complete the quest this way. You can instead just keep the key and use it on whatever other wooden skeleton key boss you want, and just ghost Diego forever. Just know that if you ever do want to complete this quest, you'll need to get a replacement wooden key. Our second quest is called Doggone Doug, and you'll need to be at least level 15 to get this quest from Renee Woofton in Old Town. She'll direct you into the Old Town Drains, where you'll need to eventually defeat the Treeminder Ghost and then return to Renee, who will then give you a wooden skeleton key. Back when this quest originally launched, you could actually get an infinite amount of wooden keys by repeatedly completing the dungeon over and over, but that exploit was eventually patched, so now you unfortunately only get the one key. Okay, next are a bunch of different bosses you can farm for a chance to get some wooden skeleton keys, so I'll be dividing them into different categories for ease of reference. First, let's talk about the skeleton keys that actually drop from skeleton key bosses themselves. Oftentimes, these same bosses you need a key to fight in the first place can drop you a replacement skeleton key, which is nice if you're doing a ton of loot farming. Obviously, if you don't have any skeleton keys to begin with, these aren't going to be a great choice for you because you basically need a key to get a key. But if you're in the middle of farming, it's always nice to get an extra run or two for free when they drop you a replacement key. Beginning with wooden skeleton key bosses and chests, all of them actually have a chance at giving you a replacement key. Obviously, we already mentioned Roberto in Wizard City in the previous section, but besides the quest leading to him, he also has a chance to drop a wooden key on defeat. Then, shifting over to Krakatopia, we have Ra and Sapoti, both of which can be found by heading into the library from the Oasis and heading through the passage to the right. At the end of the hallway, you'll find the boss Sapoti in the key chamber to the left, and the other boss, Ra, all the way at the end. Both these wooden skeleton key bosses are pretty easy fights and are still popular farming spots, so with any luck you may just get a replacement wood key when you're fighting them. Next we have the locked chest, which can be found at the end of the Pagoda of Harmony dungeon in Kembaalung village. You'll need to defeat 2 mobs and then the final boss Sutsui before you can access the skeleton key lock behind him, which leads to a chest, and among the many possible rewards, you have a chance to get a replacement wooden skeleton key. Also in Kembaalung village is the Hollow Mountain dungeon with its own wooden skeleton key boss, the Temple Phantom. To access this boss, you'll need to complete potentially 3 to 4 different fights. First, you'll fight 2 mobs, and then potentially the Temple Guardian boss if you fail the puzzle, before entering Hamakalla's Mausoleum, where you can access the wooden key room to the left of the first mob fight. Inside is the Temple Phantom skeleton key boss, who can potentially drop a replacement wooden key upon defeat. Moving on to Marleybone, there's Billy the Cutter and another locked chest found in Barkingham Palace that can drop replacement wooden keys. Billy the Cutter's key room is found in the statewing in the second room after fighting 2 mobs, and the locked chest can be accessed after defeating a mob and then the chief whip boss in the main hall. Finally, we have our last locked chest, which can be found in Lower Zigzag. Upon entering this dungeon, you'll find the wooden skeleton key door behind the second set of caged manders about halfway through the dungeon. Inside is a chest with loot where you have a chance at getting a replacement wooden skeleton key drop. Up next, we have 5 stone skeleton key bosses that have a chance at dropping some wooden skeleton keys, and I actually have a dedicated guide on how to fight all these guys if you're interested. First is the Ether Elemental, which is located in the northeast Arrow Plains near the bridge, and if it feels like it's taking forever to reach him, that's because it is. I'm begging you, KI, add a freaking teleport hub to this area. Next is Captain Hawkins and Safaria, who can be found in this building to the left side of the waterfront and requires a bit of spamming to defeat. Then there's Fellspawn in Wizard City, who can be found in this bottom left portion of the catacombs, which can be accessed from the drains in Gollum Court. There's Stay Puffed Marshfellow in the Nibelheim Mines of Caramel, where you get to play the worst version of Hot Potato, where if you lose, you just die. And finally, the Verboten Mimic, which can be found across this bridge in the River District of Agrabah in Mirage. Finally, let's talk about all the gold skeleton key bosses that can drop wooden skeleton keys upon defeat. And for those that don't know, I have another super in-depth guide for all these bosses and their drops, which will be in the description, so if you want more info, definitely check that out. There's Baron von Bracken, who can be found behind this door in Tanglewood Way in Wisteria. Drowned Dan, who can be found in the central chamber in the Arboretum of the Science Center in Celestia. High Lord Magus, who basically replaced the old Lore Master boss and is now found on the left-hand side of the library in the Athenaeum of Dragonspire. Ixcac's Cursed Wing, whose new sigil is found to the far back left side in 3 points in Azteca. And King Boar, who is found in the cave behind the waterfall in Safarstid Pass. Krampus, who is a Yuletide season only boss who can be found in multiple areas but is easiest to access behind the Ice Tree Kelvin in Ravenwood. Lady Stonegaze, who is found to the right and down the path from the entrance to Aquila in this building just before you reach the entrance to Atlantia. There's also Lambent Fire, who can be found in this sigil near the entrance to the Crystal Caves in Avalon, which can be accessed from the catacombs. Then there's the Spirit of Ignorance, who can be found immediately to the right upon entering Crab Alley from Triton Avenue. And finally, Takanobu the Masterless, who can be found straight down from the Fish Teleport in the Cave of Solitude area in Mooshu. Again, if you want all the specifics on all these bosses, their cheats and drops, and how to get gold or stone skeleton keys as well, I definitely recommend checking out my other thorough guides on the subject, but hopefully you'll get some wooden skeleton keys as an added bonus while farming them. Moving on from all those skeleton key bosses, let's talk about a few farming options you have from Gauntlets. If you happen to have the Unforgiven Dead Gauntlet, the final boss, Banreislua, does drop wooden keys, but you do have to fight a whole bunch of other enemies to reach them, which doesn't make for fast farming, and you obviously need access to the gauntlet in the first place. I will say that the Unforgiven Dead Gauntlet does regularly drop some pretty great jewels, and my favorite, very rare wand stitch, but otherwise I can't really recommend this one for easy key farming. However, if you're interested in housing gauntlets in general, I do have an in-depth guide on them and all their drops, which I'll link below. Otherwise, your other gauntlet options are the Crocopatra and Rattlebones Master Duels, which can either be bought from the Crown Shop for 500 crowns each, or farmed from a number of different bosses. Each challenge is one-time use only, so you need to repeatedly farm or pay for new challenge duels each time for a chance to then get a wooden skeleton key drop, and at that point you're farming challenge duels to maybe get wooden keys, which just feels like adding extra steps for no reason, so I don't recommend wasting your time with these unless you're farming them anyway for the other gear they drop. Okay, after all that, we finally have our good old regular bosses you can consistently farm wooden keys from. With these options, there's no entry requirement besides potentially your level and quest progression, so these are usually going to be your ideal farming options with no other strings attached. Beginning in Wizard City, we have 5 different bosses to choose from, including Bastia Gravewind in the northwestern part of Firecat Alley, General Achilles in his tower at the very end of Cyclops Lane, the Kraken, which can be accessed through this teleport in Triton Avenue and basically acts as a street boss, and formerly the coolest farming location in general, if you know you know.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Lord Nightshade at the end of Haunted Cave, and finally Prince Cobblestone at the end of Colossus Boulevard. Now, these bosses are incredibly easy to defeat because of their low health and lack of cheats, but I will say that in my experience, they do tend to be rather stingy with dropping any wooden skeleton keys, probably because they're so easy to kill. So basically, while you can absolutely repeat these fights quite quickly and probably win on the first round each time, you'll likely need to farm them each a lot to get wooden keys consistently. I will say these are solid options for low levels who may want wooden keys early and don't have access to higher level worlds yet, and both Kraken and Lord Nightshade are in free-to-play areas for any non-members, but I wouldn't recommend them as much to higher levels who have better options available. In addition, I do want to note that now that we can see the contents of some of these bosses' second chance chests, it does look like they've removed wooden skeleton key drops from the chests, so I'm not sure if that means the bosses themselves have also stopped dropping the keys after recent updates or if it only affects the chests, but maybe people in the comments can let me know if they've gotten any skeleton key drops recently or not. Just something to keep in mind if you do choose to farm any Wizard City bosses. Moving on, we have multiple bosses in Kembaalung Village, just off of Krokotopia, which can drop wooden keys. First, there's Sutsui in the Pagoda of Harmony dungeon, though you will need to defeat 2 mobs first before reaching him, and thankfully he has no cheats to worry about. Then there's 2 bosses in the other dungeon, Hollow Mountain. After defeating 2 mobs, you'll find a puzzle that you need to solve, but if you purposefully fail this puzzle, you'll summon the Temple Guardian boss, a balanced boss with a few annoying spells, but thankfully no cheats to worry about, and he has a chance to drop you some wooden keys. Moving further into the dungeon, you'll face Master Tonkatsu after clearing at a few more mobs, and I must admit, it's at this point that I usually start feeling a bit hungry. Basically, Tonkatsu is joined by several types of bowl minions, with each serving a different purpose, such as buffing, shielding, or casting accuracy debuffs, stuns, and heals. In addition, at the end of every round, Tonkatsu will beckon the evil spirit, Hamakala, to attack you, and he'll deal 100 balance damage to all wizards, so you'll want to finish this fight fairly quickly, but you may be rewarded with a wooden skeleton key for your efforts, and there's also a second chance chest if you want another shot at any drops. I don't necessarily think this is your best farming option just because there are so many mob fights you have to complete to access the relevant bosses, but I will say that there are some interesting drops here, especially a particularly amazing balance amulet that I talk about in a different video if you're interested, so it might be worth your time to farm here for a bit. Next is Marleybone, where there are 5 different boss fights that can drop wooden keys, all located in Barkingham Palace. In the first dungeon, the Statewing, you can fight the woman's right hand after finishing 2 mob fights. Thankfully, this boss has no cheats, but the trade-off is that you do have to complete 2 other fights first before you can access him each time you run the dungeon, which slows down farming by quite a bit. In the second dungeon, the main hall, there are 2 bosses that can drop wooden keys, Chief Whip, who is the second fight in the dungeon after a mob fight, and then the Noxious Gas Golem in the third fight, who is joined by Chief Whip again. Chief Whip has a few annoying cheats, including casting Spirit Armor when a wizard casts any damage spells, reviving his allies, entangling wizards who cast healing spells, and gaining extra pips through Donate Power. The Noxious Gas Golem, on the other hand, summons gas elemental mobs and casts smoke screens on players, while Chief Whip supports him by recycling several of the same cheats from his first fight because apparently he didn't learn his lesson the first time.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Between the Gas Golem constantly summoning minions and Chief Whip's healing cheats, these fights can be rather difficult and tedious. So while it's nice that there are 2 bosses that can potentially drop wooden keys here, I would say your final option of Marleybone may be a better choice. The last dungeon is the Rooftop, and here you can find several more bosses that all drop wooden skeleton keys. First, you need to defeat Margarita Vizzini, who has several cheats up her sleeve. If she is damaged, she can interrupt cast a Myth Blade on herself and then use a natural attack on a wizard. She will also sometimes interrupt cast a Storm Prism and then Triton you, and she can also pierce or disarm you depending on what shields or charms you have active. Finally, once her health drops below 50%, she can cast a Myth Bubble and also Myth Trap you every round. Thankfully, these cheats are fairly easy to work around if you just blade up and then use an AoE to wipe out both her and her minion at the same time. She's most dangerous if her minion is dead, and she's still alive under 50% health, so try to avoid that. Once she's gone, you can then board the airship where you'll find Mr. Poole and Mr. Utterson, which are your first set of bosses that can drop wooden skeleton keys. Their cheats involve copying each other's actions, so if one casts a blade or trap, the other will follow suit, and Mr. Utterson casts ice spells while Mr. Poole casts fire. While their ability to gang up on you can be a bit annoying, the easiest way to deal with these two is to blade up and feint and then AoE both at once to kill them. However, if that doesn't work for you, focusing down one makes it a lot easier to then take out the other since the cheats will not activate anymore. You'll then be faced with a fairly simple puzzle, but be aware that if you fail, you will have to fight a Union Jack Golem, so I recommend avoiding that. You'll then find yourself up against the final boss, Dr. Jekyll, or should we say, Mr. Hound. This boss is interesting in that he switches between two different forms and uses both fire and ice spells. While in his Jackal form, he uses ice spells and can interrupt cast ice bubbles and also Legion shields if he's damaged. His natural attack also allows him to use Steel Ward on the wizard he attacks. However, after every 4th round, Dr. Jekyll will polymorph into Mr. Hound and apply a fire bubble. During this phase, he will cast a fire blade on himself and then use a natural attack if damaged. In both phases, if his minions are all defeated and he's still alive, Dr. Jekyll / Mr. Hound will cast a Lava Giant with an accuracy debuff on your wizard. Since Dr. Jekyll's ice spells tend to be more defensive and he'll likely shield at some point, I recommend first taking out his minions with an AoE and removing any shields he has placed on himself, then try to follow up and finish him off in his Mr. Hound phase when his attacks are more offensive and he won't be shielding himself anymore, though you do need to watch out for the Lava Giant spell. However you defeat him, you should have a chance to get a wooden skeleton key drop, and as an added bonus, he does have a second chance chest if you want to gamble a few crowns for another drop. Between the 3 dungeons mentioned here, I personally recommend the rooftops as my top choice for farming keys, with the main hall being the next best choice. I find that the Noxious Gas Golem and Chief Whip tend to be harder and more tedious to farm than bosses like Mr. Utterson, Poole, and Dr. Jekyll, but you may have your own preferences. Both dungeons have 2 bosses that can drop wooden skeleton keys, so it never hurts to mix it up if you're having bad luck getting the drops you want. Now that we're done in Marleybone, let's head over to Mooshu, where there are a ton of potential bosses that can drop wooden keys. First is the War Oni in the Crimson Fields dungeon in Hametsu Village. I will say that this can be a fairly long dungeon with multiple mob fights and other bosses you need to defeat. In fact, the War Oni is the very last boss in the entire dungeon and is fought after first defeating the boss Katsumori, who transforms into the War Oni, so this is definitely not a quick farm and I don't really recommend it, though at least there is a second chance chest available. Next is the Plague Oni in Shirataki Temple in the Shoshin Village, and once again, I don't really recommend this boss because it's the final fight in the dungeon, and you have to complete around 7 other fights before you even reach them, so it's just not very efficient farming-wise, though there is a second chance chest here if you want to pay for extra drops. Then we have kind of a weird case with the boss Mika Skarka, located in the Jade Palace, who is actually a non-repeatable boss related to the quest Positively Absolutely that acts as part of the pre-quest for reaching Avalon for the first time. So it's not farmable since you can only fight the boss once, but hey, you might get a wooden key, so that's nice, I guess. After that, we have Oakheart in the Village of Sorrow, and to access this side boss, you will need to have completed some of Mossback's previous quests in earlier areas, starting with the quest I'm Cursed in the Cave of Solitude. However, I actually think it's a pretty good time investment to do so, because Oakheart is a life boss with fairly low health and few annoying spells to deal with, so you can easily and rapidly farm him for wooden keys. Next, we have 4 bosses in the Tree of Life dungeon, all who have a chance to drop wooden keys. First, there's Nobunaga near the Central Meadow Teleport. Then Yokai, who's actually a secret boss located in the building right near the Crimson Bridge Teleport. Yokai has a fair bit of health compared to other bosses in this dungeon, but he does spawn a second chance chest upon defeat and gives the badge Sword Saint, which is pretty cool. Finally, there's Kagemusha, who turns into the Death Oni at the very end of the dungeon, both of which can also drop keys, making this place a great option for rapidly farming keys since every single boss has a chance to drop them. And for our very last boss in Mooshu, there's the Jade Oni in the Emperor's Throne Room. This boss is a solid option because there's only one fight, it has no minions with it, and it can be respawned over and over again without ever leaving the area, which makes it a super fast farming option. Finally, we have our very last option on this list, which is Malistaire the Undying, found in the graveyard in Darkmoor. Now, Darkmoor has kind of a negative reputation at times, mainly with people fleeing the dungeon early, not knowing the cheats, and the difficulty of the fights, so I have a feeling this won't be most players' go-to option for farming keys. Malistaire is the third fight in the graveyard and also the main source of the much desired level 100 Darkmoor gear, so while I wouldn't recommend farming him just for the keys alone, at least if you're already farming him for his gear drops, you may get a lucky bonus wooden key in the process. Just try not to tear your hair out when half the team flees right after defeating the first boss for the millionth time. Alright, now that we've discussed all your options for farming wooden skeleton keys, what are your best options? For low levels or people without membership, I would say try to focus on Lord Nightshade or Kraken, both of which are fairly easy bosses in free-to-play areas, though I will say they can be a bit stingy with consistently dropping keys compared to other options in this video. At slightly higher levels, I definitely recommend the rooftops in Barkingham Palace, since there are multiple bosses in the same dungeon that drop wooden keys, namely Mr. Utterson/Pool and Dr. Jekyll, and I've personally found they drop pretty consistently. And in the process, you may also get some lucky drops from some of the royalty-themed wands, which can be pretty cool for stitching. In Mooshu, there's honestly a bunch of decent options, with my top picks being either the Jade Oni for its ease of farming and quick respawn, or Oakheart for its fairly low health and lack of frustrating spells. However, I do want to give an honorable mention to the entire Tree of Life dungeon, since every single fight and boss has a chance to drop wooden keys too. However, I think the best and easiest choice on this list is pretty obvious at this point: crafting wooden keys from the ratemystitch event. Considering you only need to spend a few minutes per day rating stitches while the event is active, and it's in a free-to-play area, this could not be easier for players of varying levels to access and complete, since you can start earning event points as early as level 10. The one downside is that the event is only active roughly once a month, but considering you can earn up to 3 keys per wizard each time the event is active, I think it's well worth the wait. Just do me a favor and try to submit some solid stitches while you're there, because this community is desperately in need of some class. Alright, my fellow wizards, that was my guide on the best ways to get wooden skeleton keys. What is your go-to option for farming skeleton keys in general, and do you have any personal favorites on this list? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help me to make more amazing Wiz content for you all. And if you want to support me and the channel further, you can hit the join button below to become one of my awesome channel members. As always, I hope to see you out there in the spiral, and happy questing!